Hi, team. All right, so let's talk about homework. Tonight, you're going to need to finish your meal paragraph. So, we haven't talked about what those are. I'm going to go through them in detail with you during this video. You probably are already doing something very, very similar when you write. It's just you know it by a different name. So we're going to talk about what a meal paragraph is. We're going to do an example together, and then you'll have the space to work. The other thing is you're going to have a reading quiz on Thursday. I know your PowerPoint says Tuesday, but it's on Thursday. Thursday. And you're going to need to read pages 98 through 108. So your quiz on Thursday will be on pages 89 to 108. Okay, so it will include a little bit back from what you see on the screen here. All right, so today we're going to talk about meal paragraphs. So meal paragraphs are a strategy that we use especially when we're writing essays, to help us make sure that we've got everything we need and that we're putting it in the correct order. So if you know strategies like raft or the burger, or if you learned something else in middle school, this is very, very, very similar. Okay, so we're going to go over what all the parts mean, and I'm going to do an example paragraph in the video so that you can see how to kind of go about all of it. All right. So just one thing I want to say before we start, which is that when you ask questions like, is this good, or can I use this quote, I'm never going to say yes to that, ever. What I am going to ask you is, does that support your central idea? Does it support your main idea? Does it fit the point you're making? Do you think it's a good piece of evidence? I am never, ever, ever just going to give you a straight up answer for questions like that. All right, because I need you to be the judge of whether it's good or not, or if you think you can use it. Okay? All right, so we're going to be working in an outline that we've developed for this paragraph so that everything is right there. It feels real nice and clean. So this is what it looks like. There are 4 sections to a meal paragraph, and they each stand for something, and that's bolded up here for you. So M is your main idea or your topic sentence, right? E is your evidence. A is analyze and interpret your evidence. And L is link your evidence back to your topic sentence. Okay, so as we work through these, we're going to go in depth about what each one means, because on the side here, this is basically like a checklist for you. So if you can check off all 3 things, then you're going to get full points for that section. Okay. All right, so my paragraph prompt says that I'm supposed to choose a central idea from my worksheet from 1.16. Okay, well, I actually have that in my head because I was just looking at it. And that central idea is going to become my M, my main idea. So the central idea I want to use is that true friends accept you for who you are, and that's it. Okay. Now I'm going to just pause before I move on, and I'm going to double check against my little checklist here and make sure I did everything right. Okay, so did I restate the question? Did I use a central idea? Yes. Did I answer the question? So in this case, that would be like, did I explain it? Yes. And did I provide an argument? So that means, could somebody say, no, actually, I don't think that's true, and here's why? Yeah, somebody could argue that that's not the case, that true friends actually kind of push you to be a better version of yourself. I mean, that's legit, right? I agree with both, but somebody could argue, right, that this is not necessarily what true friendship is. Okay, so I've got my central idea here, so now I'm going to move on to my evidence. Okay, so let me just read through what I have to do before I start writing. So I need to put the quote in context. What does that mean? That means I need to talk about what's happening in the story at this time before I give the quote. If you don't do that, or if I don't do that, the quote basically doesn't mean anything because I don't know what's happening around it. I don't know what the situation is. I don't know who's involved, right? In the same way that when you tell a story to your friends, you tell them the lead up of what happened before you get to the big thing, right? This is the same thing. You have to give some of the background, some of the context. Okay, so let me just keep that in mind going forward. I have to use good linking words. Okay, so that means I need to identify who's talking, and I need to use a direct quote. Okay, well, let me grab my book. And if we're talking about true friends accept who you are, there's a couple different things I'm thinking of. I'm thinking about the time when Charlie met Sam and Patrick and they went to the diner and they were asking him a bunch of questions. I'm thinking about how they gave him the suit and the typewriter for Christmas because they saw that he liked to write. I'm thinking about also at Christmas when he reads the poem and he says, they just knew, and that's all you can ask from a friend. So I think I want to go for the suit at Christmas. So I'm going to turn to that in my book and see where that is. All right, so I'm looking at the page. Okay, and I see here the part where it says, aha, no one was left except for Patrick, and he stood up and walked into the kitchen. Does anyone want any chips? Yada, yada. He came out with 3 tubes of Pringles and a suit coat. He walked up to me and he said that all the great writers wear suits all the time. So I put on the suit, even though I didn't really feel like I deserved to, since all I write are essays for Bill. Okay, so I think that's the quote I want to use. So what I'm going to do is the first thing is I'm going to put it in context. So what's happening at this time? Well, Charlie and his friends are at their Christmas party and they are revealing who had who for Secret Santa. So I'm just going to put that for my context because I think that sums it up really well. So Charlie and his friends Okay, I've got my context. Great. So the next thing I need to do is include linking words. So that means I identify who's talking. And I'm going to start with where Charlie says he came out with 3 tubes of Pringles and a suit coat. So that's Charlie talking. Okay. If I wanted to start with Patrick saying something, then I would say Patrick says. But because I'm starting with Charlie, that's what I'm going to say. So I'm just going to say Charlie says, and then I'm going to copy my quote directly from the book. And if there's a part in the middle of my quote that I don't want, I'm going to put a ... So I'll show you what that looks like. I'm still typing my quote, so just give me a second. Done with my quote, gonna make sure I put those quotation marks at the end. So when I'm looking at this, I see that it's possible here, right? I could take this out if I really wanted to. So if I want, because it's not totally necessary. So if I wanted to do that, I would just put ... and then my quote would look like that, okay? I'm actually gonna put it back in because I think it belongs there. Okay, so let me just double check with my checklist. Did I put the quote in context? So did I talk about what's happening in the story at this time? Yes. Did I use good linking words and identify the speaker? Yes. Did I use a direct quote from the text? Yes. That supports the topic sentence. Yes, I think this really does. And now I'm going to get to explain how. Okay. So I have a bunch of stuff I have to do in this part of my paragraph where I'm analyzing and interpreting. And the first thing on the list is I need to explain what this quote means and why it's important. So sometimes those two can be in the same things, but I'm going to start with what it means. So this quote means, let me think for a minute. This quote means, okay, well, Patrick noticed that Charlie writes a lot, even though Charlie doesn't really talk about it with them. So I'm going to put that. So this quote means that Patrick Okay, so this quote means that Patrick noticed Charlie writes a lot, even though Charlie never talked about it. Okay, I think that's good. I can always go back and add more later. So explains why this quote is important. Okay, so well, here I think there's a couple reasons. One, Patrick was paying attention to his friend. Two, Patrick is really thoughtful because he wanted to get his friend, he wanted to help his friend work on his interests. Three, he accepted his friend for having those interests. Okay. And four, he didn't judge his friend, he didn't make fun of him, he just let him have it. Okay. So I'm going to add all four of those things to my paragraph, and I'm going to put each one in a separate sentence because I think that makes it more clear. So this quote is important. Oops. Okay, so here's what I added. I said, this quote is important because Patrick was paying attention to Charlie. He cares about Charlie, and the fact that he noticed that Charlie writes shows, let me change that, shows that he cares and he's interested in Charlie. It's also important because Patrick didn't judge Charlie for writing. Instead, he got Charlie a present that will help Charlie further interest his writing. Okay, I want to add here Patrick was paying attention to Charlie. I want to add something there because Patrick is a senior, right? And Charlie's a freshman. So, like, he didn't really, that's not always possible, right? Like, you don't always have seniors be friends with freshmen. So, I think that's part of what's happening here. And I think also we've been hearing about this friendship from Charlie's point of view. And we know that Charlie really looks up to Patrick and Sam. And now we get to see that they actually feel the same way about him, right? They care about him too. So I want to add that here. So this quote is important because Patrick was paying attention to Charlie. We know how much Charlie cares about. We know how much Charlie cares about Patrick, And this is one of the first times we get to see how Patrick feels about Charlie. Okay, he cares about Charlie, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. I love that. Okay, let me go back to my list so I can do the next thing. Okay, so now I need to make connections to another part of the book. Okay, so this makes me think about Sam because Sam got him a typewriter, right? So Sam was doing the same thing Patrick did. She noticed that Charlie writes and she gave him a gift to help him with that. So I'm going to put that down. Okay, so I said this connects to when Sam got Charlie the typewriter because she also noticed his likes and dislikes and gave him something to help him get better at writing. Great. All right, I'm almost done with this part. So next is makes inferences. So when we make an inference, that means we use what we read to figure something out. And this kind of reminds me of what I said before, right? Which is that like we kind of see these friendships from Charlie's point of view, and we know that Sam and Patrick are really important to him. And this is a place where we get to see that he is actually really important to them too, and that they genuinely care about him and his happiness, and they really want to be his friend. So that's the inference that I'm going to add here. Okay. So how do I want to start? Let me say, I think I'm going to say since we mostly see. Okay, so here's what I added. I said, since we mostly see these friendships from Charlie's point of view, we really understand that he cares a lot about Sam and Patrick and that he looks up to them. In this example, we get to see Sam and Patrick feel the same way about Charlie. They care about who he is, they support his interests, and they help him feel accepted. Okay, so the last thing I have to do is talk about the implications or the effects. So, what's the effect of Sam and Patrick caring about Charlie? Well, that makes me think of this is the first time he really feels loved since his Aunt Helen died. So I'm going to put that. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to do my last piece. And that's where I need to link my evidence back to my topic sentence. So my topic sentence is that true friends accept you for who you are. And I need to specifically say how the evidence proves the topic sentence is true. So I'm going to say this evidence proves that true friends accept you for who you are because Sam and Patrick spent their own money to help Charlie with his interests. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Okay, so I want to make one last thing really clear. You see how much is in, especially in these two sections, the E and the A, you see how much? That is the expectation that we have for you. If you hand me a paragraph with like one sentence in the M, one sentence in the E, one in the A, and one in the L, that's going to get you like an 8 out of 20. It's not going to be what you want. You've got to really take your time, stretch your thinking, and talk about what this situation means, why this is important for Charlie or for the other characters, whatever it is that you're talking about. Okay. If you need some help stretching your thinking, you can always ask me or Miss Townsend to help you out.